Hello, and welcome to the fourth bonus episode of Chorus Place. I'm so glad you've chosen to join me for today's conversation. In today's episode, I'll be talking about the joys and challenges of the summer working at the camp that I've been doing this bonus series on. As always, if you like what you hear, please leave a review and/or comments, follow my podcast, and tell your friends. Also, please follow the podcast page I've made on Facebook. If you'd like to contact me via email instead of a Facebook message, you can email me at corachin@mailbox.org. If you are new here, welcome. I'm your host, Cora, and I'm so excited to have you on this journey with me. Today, I want to talk to you about the joys and the challenges I faced over the summer while working at camp. I want to start by talking to you about the challenges, and then I will bring the emotion of the episode back up to a positive note by talking about the joys. The goal with this episode and series is not to discourage anyone, but to share more about my camp experience, and to me, that means to share about the joys and the challenges as well. To be honest, I faced many different challenges over the summer. Some being physical, with being super tired from not getting as much sleep, and also working a lot harder and longer than I'm used to. There were also some challenges emotionally and mentally due to some situations that happened, some of which I will get into in this episode. While it wasn't easy to have those challenges, God was with me through each of them. One big challenge that I wanted to talk about was something that happened during our senior high week of camp in mid-July. I said in a previous episode that I went home for a few days during our senior high week. I was supposed to be gone from the Thursday evening of that week to the following Monday, so a total of 4 nights. But then, I had to go home that Wednesday evening because of something that happened the Sunday night/Monday morning before. I will back up to the very beginning of the story so it'll hopefully make more sense. The Monday that the senior high week started, I got a phone call from my mom at about 8:30 or so that morning. I don't usually get a lot of phone calls in general, and especially not that early in the day, so in the moment, it seemed really odd that she was calling me, especially given the time of day she was calling me. I feel like I usually make more phone calls than receive them. I don't remember what I said at first when I answered, but she was calling me to tell me that my great-grandma had passed away late in the night before. That was difficult. I tried to hold back tears at first, but then after my mom and I hung up, I couldn't hold them back as easily for a little bit. I had just called my great-grandma a couple of days prior to that, so for her to have passed away so soon after that call was a little surprising. My main emotions at first were shock, grief, and sadness. I had also kind of started to feel a little guilty at one point because I had wanted to be more intentional in calling my great-grandma more, but then I let so many things get in the way and I can't go back and undo it now. If I had the chance to go back and do things over again, I would go back and I would have called her more often. I definitely struggled to process it for a few days, and I also felt like I was in a fog and couldn't think straight for a little while too. It was really challenging to go through that Monday and part of the week of work dealing with that loss, but not really being able to talk with many people about it very much due to being busy. I did tell a couple of people at the camp about it at one point though. Another hard part of that week was that a lot of our staff was camping that week, so we had a lot of part-timers. We still had a couple of full-timers, myself included, and several part-time workers that weren't camping that week, so that was helpful, but it was still kind of sad to not have all of our full-time staff together working then. I told the head of staff girls later that day about my great-grandma, and she was really sweet about it. And then I also told her mom about it a little, and she was nice about it too. Our head of staff girls and I didn't talk about it much, but we did talk about it some for a second in between staff dinner and camper dinner that Monday. I would usually work in the dining hall during meals, but with that dinner, our head of staff girls let me go back to the staff building during camper dinner to process and think. I definitely appreciated that. I felt a little bad that I wasn't in there to help with dinner, but I also needed some time to process. Working during the meals when I first found out, and then the meals the next day was kind of hard emotionally, but I made it through with God's grace and strength. My great-grandma had been dealing with a lot of health issues in the last several months before she passed away, but then I guess things either got worse or something else had happened right before she passed away. By the time I was able to make it back to be with my family that Wednesday evening, they were already at my great-grandma's house. My dad got to pick me up from the camp that Wednesday evening, and it was so wonderful to see him again. That was the first time I had gotten to see him the whole summer since I had gotten dropped off at camp at the beginning of June, like I mentioned in the first episode of this series. Hugging him that evening was absolutely incredible. I had missed him so much. We got in the car and started the drive to my great-grandma's house. Her house was between 2 and 2.5 hours away from the camp. We stopped to grab a quick dinner/snack for while we drove, and then stopped again for gas and to throw away our trash once we had made it into the town my great-grandma lived in. When he and I made it back with my mom and siblings that night, it was kind of strange for me just trying to get used to being with all of them again. My siblings were all being really energetic and wanting to talk to me all at once, which was crazy. It was good to be back with them, but also hard trying to readjust again. The next day was the visitation, funeral service, and burial. The funeral service was hard for me emotionally to get through, but then I was okay after that. I'm not usually much of a crier in general, but I think I had just been going through so much throughout the week with processing and was also still super tired from camp. After the burial, we went back to my great-grandma's house to wait on the flowers to be delivered. After the flowers were all delivered, my family went out for dinner with my aunts, uncles, and cousins, and then we went back to the house. The next day, my parents, siblings, and I left to go back to our house, but we went to a baseball game before we made it home. It felt weird to be at my great-grandma's house during those couple of days for the funeral, and my great-grandma wasn't there. There have been a couple of times since the funeral that I have wanted to call her, but then I have to remind myself that I can't, which is hard. I didn't take her cell phone number or her home phone number off of my phone for a couple of days, and once I finally did that, it felt really strange to not have them on my phone anymore. My great-grandma passing away was one of the biggest trials of the summer, but there were also a few smaller ones too, like being away from my family for so long, not getting as much sleep every night, having to learn all new routines, sometimes feeling a little overwhelmed when there was a lot of activity all at once for meals, etc. There was a verse I came across on August 14th, and it was both comforting and confusing to me. It stuck out to me that day after the loss of my great-grandma earlier in the summer. The verse was Proverbs 14, verse 13, and I read it in the English Standard Version. It says, "Even in laughter the heart may ache, and the end of joy may be grief." I read it in a couple of other translations after, which kind of helped it make more sense, but I still had to think through it after reading it in different translations. It was comforting because of dealing with the loss of my great-grandma this summer, 2023. So, the verse was a reminder to me that I can still laugh even when I have an aching, meaning heavy or sad, heart. It was confusing, though, because of how it says the end of joy may be grief. I still don't fully understand that part. Some of the many joys of the summer were blasting music and singing at the top of my lungs with my friends on staff, making new friends, laughing a ton, going out for coffee with my friends a couple of times, whenever I would see my dad, since I didn't see him as much as the rest of my family because of him not being home when I was home the first time in June, good food, hanging out with people, going to church and seeing some people I knew, seeing my grandparents in July for a little bit because they were in town, whenever I would get to be back at my home church, sleeping in my own bed when I could, hanging out with the staff, seeing other friends when I would come home for a little bit, going for walks, going out driving with friends, still being able to keep in touch with friends and family back home, sleeping in when I could, all the egg jokes I made, the inside joke one of my friends and I came up with from a story she told me, hanging out with the staff on weekends, watching movies or playing games, working in a canteen, the snack store, going on hayrack rides, listening to music, going swimming a couple of times, the slip and slide the staff did one evening, playing carpet ball on my own one day, going on the hike at the state park, even when it was difficult, and being able to grow spiritually. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please follow my podcast, leave a comment and or review of my podcast if you haven't already, and please follow my podcast page on Facebook so you never miss an update. If you have any verses you'd like me to read on a future episode, or if you have any topics you'd like me to talk about, you can email me at corachin@mailbox.org, send me a message on my podcast page on Facebook, or a voice message through the link in the show notes, and I will get back to you when I can. Hope you tune in next week for the 5th bonus episode.